We've all had the very same argument with money. Maybe just even last week, maybe this morning. It starts about the credit card bill or the type of holiday you're going to book this year or the school fees. And within about 90 seconds, it isn't about any one of those things anymore. It's about something so much older, something that neither of you can actually quite name. That's because the argument around money isn't happening in our heads. It's happening in our nervous system, in our bodies. And there's some fascinating research that has suggested that the blueprint driving those bodies was formed before either of you turned 6 years old. So before we go any further, I want you to comment below and tell me the phrase that always comes up when you and your partner argue about money. You never ask me about holidays before you book them, or you always do this. I'd love to notice these patterns with you. This is episode 5 of the Body of Wealth series. And over the last 4 episodes, we've been doing some very deep individual work around how your body responds, your nervous system, your emotions, your patterns. And most of us don't experience money alone. We experience it in a relationship, whether it's your partner, spouse, somebody, sometimes with a parent perhaps, or even a grown-up teenager, or a business partner perhaps. Maybe even your boss when you're wanting to ask for a pay rise. And these conversations are where every piece of inner work that you've ever done around this subject are being tested at their most. My name's Catherine Morgan. I'm a former qualified financial advisor, and I now am a trained somatic financial coach and teach others in this modality. And I'm host of the It's Not About the Money podcast. And over the last 8 years of hosting this show and working with hundreds of individuals and couples, and honestly, in watching my own observations through my own marriage and my own relationships, I've learned something that has reshaped how I understand every single money argument that I've ever seen. And very often the fight isn't about the money. It is about two individuals speaking two completely separate languages of safety. So by the end of this video and episode, you're going to understand why your partner's reaction may make no sense to you and why yours makes no sense to them. I'm also going to talk you through 2 of the money story type archetypes, pairing these and creating some interesting resolutions around some typical couple conflicts that I've seen around money. And you're going to learn some language to use in your conversations with your partners around money in the next couple of minutes to start to shift some of those patterns. So let's dive into this area. So first of all, let's just picture a typical money scene. You and your partner are at the kitchen table, laptops are open, credit card statements are sitting in front of you. One of you looks at the holiday dream destination that you have just seen on Instagram, and maybe you've just booked it and gone ahead and you're feeling so excited about this. And then the other person in the relationship looks at the same holiday and feels the floor drop beneath them. And what is happening underneath this conversation is that those 2 different reactions aren't necessarily a disagreement about the money. They're 2 different bodies that are telling 2 very different stories about what money means. And research has suggested that our relationship with money is largely shaped based on the perceptions, the influences that we grew up around before the age of 6. So we've watched, we've absorbed, we've not even consciously recognized what those beliefs may have been, but somatically in the body, by the time we're old enough to form proper memory and conversations around money, your nervous system has already decided what money has meant for your safety as an individual. Now, one of those bodies may have learnt that saving is how you stay safe. Perhaps that person grew up watching a parent count coins at the kitchen table. Perhaps that body knew what it feels like to answer a knock at the door and hope that it isn't someone coming to collect the sofa or the television. And for that human being, a spending decision isn't a spending decision. It's literally an entire threat to survival. And the other human in this conversation may have learned something completely different. That perhaps they may have learned that growing up in a household where money was locked down so tightly that any kind of fun with it felt like rebellion, or where money was used as a reward, a punishment, or a way of controlling behavior. And so for that individual, a very carefully articulated spreadsheet doesn't feel like security. And neither of these human beings are wrong. Both are doing exactly what they were shaped to do, to keep them safe. And they just have completely different ideas around what safety actually looks like. And this is why the old money arguments can come up. Like, you're too controlling. Don't be so reckless. We can't afford this. And really, we're not having a conversation about money at all. We're watching two nervous system protection responses defend themselves in real time. And researchers suggested that different emotions register in different places in our body. Grief tends to sit in the chest. Fear tends to move up through the guts. Resentment can often settle in the jaws and in the shoulders, long before either of you could even say anything about money across the kitchen table and your holiday. Your nervous system is finding its way to show through emotions, through behaviors, through thinking patterns. And what's really interesting for me when I think about conflict around money is that most couples don't realize that up to 42% of adults in a committed relationship are hiding some form of financial information from their partner right now, whether that is about their credit card spending or a sneaky purchase, debts, or even a salary increase. And not because they don't love each other, they don't trust each other, that they're bad people, but it's because somewhere along the way, their body, their nervous system has learned that the truth wasn't safe to share. And it was easier to hide the receipt, to hide the purchases, than actually argue about money. And keeping the peace is really like keeping the secret. And this is what happens when two different responses come together and what's happening isn't actually named in the room. So the question becomes, how do you recognize the pattern that is sitting underneath when you're having these financial conversations? And this is where the Money StoryTypes tool comes in. The Money StoryTypes tool consists of 5 very distinct patterns that we've mapped over years of working with clients. If you're watching on video, you can see some of these in my background. They're 5 protective strategies that we have developed in response to what money meant based on our earliest experiences. And most of us have one dominant money story type. And what's interesting based on our data from our communities is that we're very often attracted to somebody with the complete opposite money story type. Not always very helpful. So let me show you the 2 pairings that create the most conflict that I see in couples. And then how do we deal with that? How do we come to a harmonious relationship with money when you have these 2 conflicting story types? So the first conflicting story type that I see is the architect and the impulsive. If you haven't done this assessment before, head to the link in the show notes or underneath this video. Go take the quiz, get your partner to do it at the same time, and let's have a look at some of these conflicting patterns. So the architect and the impulsive, this is actually based on mine and my husband's relationship with money. The architect is my husband. Like, his body finds safety in structure, in plans, in spreadsheets, in looking at the numbers and the data, knowing what's coming next week, next month, next year. And so when life feels uncertain, the architect builds the system and then their nervous system can relax. Now, what's interesting about the architect is right now we're living in a digital money age. We don't even really use cash anymore. And so for the architects, most money with it now being invisible, where it's just tap, 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 or subscriptions that just auto renew, then actually it makes it harder for the architect. And researchers suggested that our nervous systems were shaped thousands of years ago to equate safety with things that we can physically see and touch and count, coins in our hands. And so for the architect's body, when those physical cues disappear, the vigilance doesn't disappear with them. It actually intensifies because there's nothing visible to actually defend. Now, the impulsive's body, in contrast, finds safety in a completely different way. This is about movement, speed, action, seizing opportunities, seizing the moment, impulse decisions. And so when life feels a little uncertain, the impulse does something. They have to move. And that's what creates relaxation and safety in their nervous system. And research again has suggested that something very specific about the impulsive pattern, that for people with neurodivergent traits, particularly ADHD, is where the brain's search for dopamine can drive the frequent desire for small frequent purchases. And what can look like recklessness from the outside, particularly to the like the architect, is often the body that's just trying to regulate. And the impulsive behavior is the body's way of searching for a moment of, phew, okay. And so the real question isn't, why won't you stop being so irresponsible with money? It's, what are you looking for? What is your body looking for? Because from the outside, it looks like one of them is responsible and the other one is reckless. But from the inside, both of them are trying to self-regulate. So the architect hears, let's book this trip tomorrow, and a wave of fear moves through their body. The impulsive, in contrast, hears, can we sit down with a spreadsheet this evening? And their entire body tightens. Neither of them is trying to be difficult. And you may recognize this in conversations you've had with money if you are predominantly in one of those story types. And it's just the different language of safety. Let's pair two of the others. Let's pair the enabler and the pacifist. So this one is a little harder to spot because there's no obvious argument with these two story types. The enabler has learned that love is demonstrated by giving to others, picking up the tab when friends go out for dinner, buying gifts, saying yes when somebody needs help, even when they're running on empty. And the enabler gives and gives and gives and gives, and sometimes doesn't know how to allow receiving. Now, the pacifist's body has learnt that money conversations aren't safe, full stop. The word responsibility comes up a lot for the pacifist. And so perhaps they've watched parents argue around money. Perhaps they've been shushed or shamed when they ask questions about it. And perhaps their parents have financially rescued them, paid off their student debts or credit cards. So the pacifist avoids. It will change the subject, whatever it needs to do. It will just agree with everything, like whatever you think is fine. And it will try and keep the peace at all costs. And so what happens when these two architects collide? The enabler keeps giving, the pacifist never quite asks. And this slow kind of resentment starts to build in the middle. There may not necessarily be an argument, but it's just a general resentment that's building up behind the scenes. And this is the pairing that I see most often with midlife women who come to me feeling, as one client put it recently, like they've been carrying an invoice that no one can see. Now, I teach the full 5 story types framework: the architect, the impulsive, the enabler, the pacifist, and the innovator inside our financial coach certification program, and actually in a lot of our work. But what I want you to take from this particular video and episode, whether you're in a partnership right now or watching a past pattern play out, is when you can name the pattern, you can stop fighting the person. The moment that you can recognize and say to your partner, my body is responding like an architect right now, and yours is responding like an impulsive. You're naming those patterns. And what it enables you to do is to identify the strategies that might actually work based on your primary archetypes. If one of you is a natural planner and one of you is a natural spender, there is a beautiful middle ground that you can come towards, but it's naming those parts in the first place that's really important. So here's a practice that I want to share with you. It comes in two parts. The first part is the pause and the second is the reframe. So first of all, with the pause, next time you're in a money conversation with your partner and you feel a physical reaction in your body, maybe that's the jaw tensing up, your chest space closing down, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, pause. Don't respond. And place a hand over your heart, take a nice deep breath, get your parasympathetic nervous system back online, even just a moment of pause to just breathe into that feeling and recognize this is what I'm feeling right now, just gives you some space between the feeling and the reaction. And maybe this will enable you then to ask a question with yourself. Is this really about the holiday or about the credit card? Or is this a safety pattern that your body is just helping you to remember? And so giving yourself that opportunity to pause and ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Is this about the money or is this something older? And that question, is this something older, will help you to just pull out of the argument and into a space of awareness. Because most of the time it is a pattern that's older than the conversation that's currently happening in the room. So remember the pause. And even if you have to say to your partner, I just need a second, and go to the bathroom, make a cup of tea, just give yourself an opportunity to just contemplate, what am I actually feeling in this moment? Now, part two is the reframe. So once you've had that opportunity to bring some awareness, to create that pause, then there's some actual language that's important in these conversations. So I'm going to give you 3 reframes. The next time you're about to say one of these sentences to your partner, I want you to try the alternative reframe instead. So if you catch yourself saying, you're too controlling with money, then try instead of that, I hear that your need to plan is trying to create security and safety around money. And right now, it makes me feel like my voice doesn't matter. Can we create some security in a way that honors both of us? So what you're doing there is you're acknowledging and hearing what they have shared and the benefit of that. I hear that you need to plan. I'm trying to create security. I can really hear that and sense that from you. And you can even thank them. Thank you for reminding me of the importance of creating a plan. But right now, this is also how I'm feeling. Can we create security in a way that honors both of those things? And that's a great reframe if you're finding yourself in that kind of tricky conversation. The second one is if you catch yourself about to say something like, stop being irresponsible with money. What you can try instead here is something like, I can see that your spontaneity brings such joy to you or to our life. And I'm really scared about our safety net right now, about how much money we have in our savings account. What would help me trust that we're still on track for our future? And so what you're doing here is you're inviting, again, the benefit of them bringing this wonderful spontaneity into your relationship, and then sharing with them what your fears are, what you're scared about, and then inviting some space for collaboration. What would help me trust that we're still on track for our future? And then the third reframe that you can steal is if you're finding yourself and catching yourself say things like, money isn't everything. Like, it's just not that important. You can see the real pacifist kind of story type here. What you can try instead is, you're right. Our relationship matters more than the bank balance. And the stress of money is damaging our peace of mind and how we feel about money. Can we make a plan together so that we can stop thinking about it and come back to each other? And what you're doing here is you're really identifying that it is much bigger than just the money conversation. You're acknowledging that you've heard what they've shared. You're right. Our relationship actually is more important than money. And the stress that it's creating for us is damaging to, your mental well-being, your financial well-being. So can we do something together? How do we pull this thing together? So 3 very different conversations, but notice what each reframe does. It really gives you both an opportunity to name your partner's protective pattern. It names what might be happening for you, and that it invites this collaborative conversation rather than it being in conflict. And if you're listening to this and you work with people around money, if you're a coach, a financial advisor, then there's a real beauty in being able to take your clients through this as well, being able to name what's going on, create that pause. And when you're in that or experiencing that conflict around money, even if it's between your parents or your children, it's that allowing space for both stories to be heard, and asking of that couple, what is happening for you right now? What is that triggering for you? And what does money mean to you in this scenario? And I think that, again, just helps couples to move out of the conflict spaces around money and actually really dive into what is actually going on underneath it. And in episode 4 of the Body of Wealth series, I talked a lot about acceptance, this state of nervous system regulation, this emotional state where we have this kind of bridge between where we might be feeling around money, around fear and guilt and shame, and then right at the top of the spectrum, joy and abundance and love. And the acceptance piece is the bit that most people miss, is they'll try and move away from the awkward, difficult conversations and want to create more joy and love and compassion around money. But by doing that, they're actually not really acknowledging or accepting that as individual people, we do have a different relationship with money. And it's about not convincing the other person that you are right and they are wrong, but it's actually that both of you have something to bring to the table. Both of you have some important messages and stories and experiences that you can bring to the table. And I know for my husband and I, for example, if he's the natural planner and I'm the natural spender, well, I go and find all the great opportunities and then he puts them in the plan. And then together we decide against our value system and what matters for us in life, what is it that we're going to decide as a couple. But we also give each other permission to have our own decisions with money. So if I want to go and be impulsive, I don't have to ask. And if he wants to go and plan and invest and do all the fun things, then that's also okay. So neither partner is wrong. Neither partner needs to be fixed. Both people just need to be witnessed. Acceptance is really important. Witnessing before coming to any potential resolution or solution. And this is the real work of money in a relationship. So if this episode or this video has really landed for you today, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go and take the Money StoryTypes assessment, and I want you to take it with your partner. I want you to find out what is your dominant pattern, and then you'll have the language for that dynamic that you've been sitting with underneath your relationship around money. And it will help you to create some dynamics around how to talk about money. So head to the link in the video or the show notes beneath this, and that would be a great place to get started. And if you're wanting to dive deeper into this work for you as an individual, then you can also come and join us in the Body of Wealth or our Wealth Resonance program. So I'll pop the links to all of those in the show notes beneath this video. And if you are a professional looking to support others around money, then you can also have a little peek at our financial coach certification program. I've linked that in the description below. So one more thing to ask you before you go. I would love to know, which pairing do you recognize in your relationships? Is it the architect and the impulsive? Is it the enabler and the pacifist, or something entirely different? Let me know in the comments below if you're watching this on my YouTube channel. And you are not alone with this. Let me tell you, I've worked with many, many people over the years. And so often those dynamics are the ones that are going to give you the most support in your relationship with money once you take the time to understand that each of you are coming from individual set points around money. Now, there's one more episode to go in this Body of Wealth series, and the final one is going to bring everything together. And I'm really excited to be sharing that with you next week. So if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give this a thumbs up and maybe share it with somebody who this would benefit. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you on the show next week.